Hello everyone, I am Crawlers and this video is all about the Battlefield 4 guns. The ones that we know of so far and their stats. At least their alpha stats, which I'm sure will take a tweaking and balancing after a good run of the beta. Now there's a lot of numbers for each gun that we already know from the alpha. So, let's try to get through this as painlessly as possible. Now, before I go through the gun listing and such, a quick side note. Battlefield 4 will apparently feature designated marksman rifles, which we sort of heard of before, which will be weapons available to all classes. Just as carbines will in also Battlefield 4. Um, Also, it seems that the engineer class has been reworked so that it will have access to PDWs, which will now be designated engineer weapons. Uh, it will also have access to designated marksman rifles and carbines. Now, here's how I see the designated marksman rifles. Since recons usually work in pairs, one being, the actual shooter and the other one being the spotter, one or both of them will carry some sort of an automatic weapon, as a backup, um, just in case there's some drama that needs to be dealt with, or a room clearing situation. I mean, you can't really go all Rambo with a long rifle or an M9 pistol now, can you? I'm also thinking this might lead to an interesting, body system and really good team play with snipers working in pairs with a spotter maybe, who may or may not have a rangefinder, although that might also take too long and take some fun out of the game. I don't know, but we'll see how they balance it. Okay, so enough foreplay, here's the weapon stats. Alright, so let's start with the AK-5C. Now, this is not the Kalashnikov variant. This is a Swedish-made carbine. Its max damage is 20 at 8 meters, which drops off to 14.3 at 50 meters. The rate of fire is 700 rounds a minute, and the muzzle velocity is 630 meters a second. Now, the recoil is 0.22 vertical or up and 0.2 left and 0.2 right. The first shot multiplier is 1.65, so to get the recoil of the first shot you multiply 1.65 by 0.22, which is the vertical recoil, and you get the total recoil for the first shot. The standing spread is 0.4 when aiming down sights, 1.5 from the hip, 0.075 increase per shot, that is, and 15 decrease, which is how fast the weapon resets, so to speak, to the minimum spread position after you've been firing it. Now, all of these values are obviously in degrees, just like Battlefield 3, and degrees per second. So I won't be saying degrees per second and listing out that for all the next weapons. I'll just prattle off the numbers. Okay, now the moving spread is 0.8 aiming down sight and 2.5 from the hip. Okay, now comes the CZ805 Bren, the Czech assault rifle. Now it has a max damage of 20 at 8 meters and a minimum damage of 16.7 at 50 meters. The rate of fire is 700 and the muzzle velocity is 580 meters a second. The recoil is 0.24 up and 0.25 left and 0.35 right, with a 2.1 first shot multiplier. The standing spread is 0.2 aiming down sight and 2 from the hip, with a 0.75 increase and a 15 decrease. And I've just said what those numbers mean before in the previous weapon, obviously, so I won't be repeating them every time. Now, the moving spread is 1 aimed down sight and 3 from the hip. Alright, now let's go on to the Chinese QBZ 951 assault rifle. The max damage is 20 at 8 meters and the mean damage is 16.7 at 50 meters. Rate of fire is 650 and the muzzle velocity is 630. Recoil is 0.2 up, 0.1 left and 0.4 right, with a first shot multiplier of 2. Now the standing spread is 0.2 aiming down sight, 2 from the hip, with a 0.075 per shot increase and a 15 decrease. Now the moving spread is 1 aiming down sight and 3 from the hip. Alrighty, now moving right along, we come to the CZ Scorpion Evo 3, which is obviously the PDW class, and comes for the engineer. Now it does a maximum damage of 16.7 at 8 meters and a minimum damage of 11 at 45 meters, with a rate of fire of 1000 and a muzzle velocity of 370 meters a second. Now the recoil is 0.4 vertical or up, 0.3 left and 0.55 right, with a first shot multiplier of 2.5. Now the standing spread is 0.5 aiming down sight and 1 from the hip, with a 0.1 increase and a 15 decrease. Now the moving spread is 0.8 aiming down sight and 1.5 from the hip. Okay, now we come to the P90, which also falls into the PDW category, obviously. Its max damage is 16.7 at 8 meters and min damage of 11.2 at 40 meters. Now the rate of fire is 900 and the muzzle velocity is 460. The recoil is 0.18 up, 0.5 left and 0.5 right, with a first shot multiplier of 2.4. The standing spread is 0.5 aiming down sight, 1 from the hip, with a 0.1 increase and a 15 decrease. The moving spread is 0.8 aiming down sight and 1.5 from the hip. Okay, next we have the Type 88 LMG with a max damage of 20 at 8 meters and a mean damage of 16.7 at 50 meters. The rate of fire is 700 and the muzzle velocity is 600. Now the recoil is 0.2 up, 0.3 left and 0.3 right, with a first shot multiplier of 1. The standing spread is 0.4 aiming down sight and 3.5 from the hip. So that's a very healthy spread from the hip, with a 0.075 increase and a 15 decrease. Now the moving spread is 1 aiming down sight and 4.5 from the hip. Alright, now we come to the Ultimax 100 LMG, which we saw in the campaign playthrough, I guess. Alright, its max damage is 20 at 8 meters and mean damage is 16.7 at 50 meters, with a rate of fire of 590 and muzzle velocity of 650. The recoil is 0.25 up, 0.2 left and 0.2 right, with a first shot multiplier of 1.5. The standing spread is 0.4, aiming down sight, and 3 from the hip, with a 0.075 increase and a 15 decrease. The moving spread is 1, aiming down sight, and 4 from the hip. Alright, now comes the Scout Elite bolt action sniper rifle, which I think is soon to become my favorite tool of the battlefield. It has a max damage of 100 at 25 meters and a mean damage of 38 at 120 meters. And by the way, this is something new in Battlefield 4. Now the bolt action rifles will kill in at 25 meter radius, which is 10 more than we had in Battlefield 3. Now the rate of fire is 63 or less if you're not good with your right hand, and the muzzle velocity is 640. And okay, the recoil is 0.25 up, 0 left, and 0 right, as you know it should be, because this is a precision instrument after all. With a first shot multiplier of 2, the standing spread is 0 aim down scope and 3.5 from the hip, with a 1.2 increase, 0 when standing and zooming, and a 15 decrease. The moving spread is 1.5 aim down sight, or scope I should say, and 4.5 from the hip. Okay, now comes the Kel-Tec RFB designated marksman rifle, which has a max damage of 43 at 15 meters and 30 at 75 meters. Its rate of fire is 260 and the muzzle velocity is 460. Now the recoil is 0.5 up, negative 0.1 left, and 0.3 right, and a first shot multiplier of 2. Now the standing spread is 0.05 aiming down sights and 3 from the hip, with a 0.6 increase and a 15 decrease. Now the moving spread is 1 aiming down sight and 4 from the hip. And now the Kel-Tec RFB assault rifle is an interesting design. It's an, as the name implies, a rifle forward ejecting bullpup design, and it's interesting for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because the magazine of it goes straight up as you insert it into the gun, instead of tilt locking, sort of like you would see on an AK or in other weapons. So this is probably a time-saving feature, I don't know. Also, the spent cartridges, and this is really interesting, they eject forward instead of sideways like on other weapons, except maybe the P90 where the cartridges eject straight down through the handle. And it's a designated marksman rifle, so it will be available for all classes. Now we come to the M9 pistol, which we're all pretty familiar with already in games. Now the max damage is 25 at 8 meters, and the min damage is 13.9 at 50 meters. Its rate of fire is 400, or slower if your right hand is not strong with the force yet. The muzzle velocity is 380 meters a second, and the recoil is 0.45 up, 0.3 left, and 0.3 right, and the first shot multiplier is 1. Now the standing spread is 0.5 aiming down sight and 1 from the hip, with a 0.2 increase and a 15 decrease. The moving spread is 0.5 aiming down sight and 1.5 from the hip. Alright, now we come to the Chinese standard sidearm, which is the QSZ-92 pistol. The damage is 20 at 8 meters and 12.5 at 40 meters. The rate of fire is 455 and the muzzle velocity is 380. Now the recoil is 0.5 up, 0.3 left and 0.6 right, with the first shot multiplier of 1. Sorry, not 0.1. The standing spread is 0.5 aiming down sight, 1 from the hip, with a 0.2 increase and a 15 decrease as always. The moving spread is 0.5 aiming down sight and 1.5 from the hip. Oh, and I almost forgot about the SV98 bolt action sniper rifle. Who could forget about that, right? So its max damage is 100 at 25 meters, as is with all bolt action rifles, and min damage of 56 at 80 meters. The rate of fire is 48 and the muzzle velocity is 520. The recoil is 0.25 up, 0 left and 0 right, which makes kind of sense because it's a sniper rifle. With the first shot multiplier of 2. The standing spread aiming is 0, which is aiming down scope, and which is kind of obvious again because it's a sniper rifle, and 4 from the hip, with a 1.2 increase, 0 when standing and zooming, and 15 decrease. The moving spread is 1.5 aiming down sight and 5 from the hip. Alright, now we come to the Hawk shotgun. It's buckshot. Obviously it has different ammo types. So its buckshot max damage is 14 at 12 meters and 5 at 25 meters. Oh, and the buckshot has 14 pellets. Now the flechette goes from 10 max at 14 meters to 7.4 at 30 meters, and again 14 pellets. The slug damage is 112 meters and 38 at 50 meters. Now the frag damage is 37.5 at 8 meters and 10 at 40 meters, with a 25 blast damage in a 2.5 meter radius. Now the rate of fire is 97. The recoil is 1.5 up, 2 left and 2 right, with a first shot multiplier of 1. The standing spread is 0.1 aiming down sights and 1.5 from the hip, with a 1.2 increase and a 15 decrease. Now the moving spread is 1.2 aiming down sights, 2 from the hip, and some shotgun specific specs here. The pellet cone is 3.5 for the buckshot and 2.5 for the flechettes. Obviously this is in degrees. The velocity is 300 for the buckshot, 450 for the flechette, 300 for the slug, and 150 for the frag rounds. And now, thank your gods, the last gun, the M82A3, the pickup gun, the awesome 50, with an insane maximum damage of 110 and a rate of fire of 125 and a muzzle velocity of 560. The recoil is 2 up, negative 0.1 left and 0.3 right, with the first shot multiplier of 1, obviously because it's not a assault rifle where you can just prattle off as many rounds as you want. Now the standing spread is 0.1 aiming down scope and 5 from the hip, which makes sense because you don't want to fire a precision long rifle from the hip. Now this with a 1.2 increase and a 15 decrease. The moving spread is 1.2 aiming down scope and 6 from the hip. And as I said in my alpha leaked specs video, you get an 11 round box magazine with 2 more in your back pocket. And the rangefinder. Apparently it works up to 1,000 meters, zeroing in on increments of 200, 300, 400, 500 and 1,000 meters. So, yeah, this has been a very long video for me, and I'm sure for you too. Thanks for watching it, and I need a drink. Please rate, share the living crap out of this video because it took a really long time to make. And check out my other videos at the end of this one. And remember, in Soviet Russia, YouTube subscribes you.